They were found in a pit, face down, arms wrapped around each other, one skeleton reaching toward the other's face, fingers resting just below the jaw, as if cradling it in the last half-second before the ceiling came down. The city above them was burning. The year was roughly 800 BCE. The dig was led by a team from the University of Pennsylvania in 1972, sifting through the ruins of Hasanlu, an Iron Age citadel in northwestern Iran, near Lake Urmia. The city had been attacked, burned, and abandoned in a single catastrophic assault. Walls had collapsed inward. Grain stores were still full. Whatever happened, the residents did not have time to flee with their food. They barely had time to flee at all. The two skeletons were found in what appears to have been a plastered storage chamber, possibly a hiding place during the assault. One of the skulls carries a puncture wound, a killing blow, struck from above, delivered while the two bodies were still intertwined. Someone found them. Someone ended them. And whoever did it left them exactly as they fell. Archaeologists called them the Hasanlu lovers. For 50 years, they were the most romantic artifact in the ancient world. A man and a woman, locked in a final embrace as their home was destroyed. A love story preserved in bone. The Penn Museum in Philadelphia, where the remains are held, once called them the saddest exhibit in the collection. Except the story was incomplete, and the correction, when it came, changed everything. In 2017, researchers at the Penn Museum ran DNA analysis on both skeletons. The results are still contested. The material has degraded significantly over 28 centuries, but the preliminary findings point in one direction. Both bodies appear to be male. And what had been the world's most famous ancient kiss became something far more complicated. Not because the love was less real, but because the story people had been telling for half a century was built on an assumption nobody bothered to check. Here is what strikes me about this case. We assume science resolves mysteries, but sometimes it just replaces the old mystery with a new, more politically charged one. The moment those DNA results were published, conservative commentators across the Middle East called for the exhibit to be removed. The embrace had been acceptable as a heterosexual tragedy. As a homosexual one, it became controversial. The bones had not changed. The tenderness had not changed. Only the story people were willing to tell about them had changed. And that tells you more about the living than it does about the dead. That is the pattern you will hear repeated across the next 25 minutes. Objects that carry stories. Stories that people need to believe. And the moment you look closer, the moment you actually test the paint, weigh the evidence, analyze the DNA, the comfortable version dissolves, and what remains is stranger than the legend. 10 objects, paintings, bones, minerals, cloth, and a single plug of wax pulled from the ear canal of a dead whale. Each one carries a reputation. Some are called cursed. Some are called haunted. One was called impossible. And every single one of them holds a secret that the label does not cover. Manila, 1892. A gallery is hung with oil paintings for a colonial exhibition. One canvas shows a woman in soft light, elegant, quiet. Eyes that seem to settle on yours no matter where you stand. The artist is Juan Luna, the most celebrated Filipino painter of his generation, a man who had won medals in Madrid and Paris, whose technique European critics compared to the Italian masters. 2 years after finishing this portrait, Luna shot his wife. Her name was Paz Pardo de Tavera. He killed her in their Paris apartment in a jealous rage, then turned the gun on his mother-in-law. A French court acquitted him under the doctrine of crime of passion, a legal framework that essentially forgave murder if the murderer was sufficiently upset. The painting survived. Its title is Minovia, and its provenance since that night reads like a casualty list. Every private owner of Minovia in the 20th century either went bankrupt or died violently. One collector was killed in a car accident within a week of purchase. In 1987, during an exhibition at the National Museum in Manila, a brand new spotlight mounted directly above the canvas exploded at the exact moment of the opening ceremony. No electrical fault was found. Now, there is a rational way to process this. Coincidence compounds. A few bad outcomes attached to a famous painting get noticed. 100 uneventful years of ownership do not. The human brain is a pattern engine, and it is especially good at finding patterns in tragedy. That is the sensible explanation, and it accounts for everything except one detail that curators at the National Museum will mention only off the record. Visitors standing near Minovia sometimes report a smell. Not paint, not varnish. Old flowers, the kind you leave on a grave. The painting now sits under reinforced security. The woman in the portrait has never been conclusively identified. Luna always called her Minovia, my sweetheart. But art historians have long suspected the face belongs not to Paz, the woman he killed, but to Angela Duch, his favorite model. If that is true, then the curse is not attached to the victim. It is attached to a substitution. A face that was never meant to carry the weight of what happened in that apartment. Who is the woman in Minovia? And does it matter if the painting has already decided what it wants? The dress is white satin with lace trim, mid-19th century. It hangs in a glass case on the second floor of Baker Mansion in Altoona, Pennsylvania, and it has never been worn. Anna Baker bought this dress in secret. Her father, Elias Baker, an ironmaster who had built the mansion with furnace money, forbade her from marrying the man she loved. He was a worker, beneath her station. Elias ended the engagement, and Anna never forgave him. She never married anyone else. She kept the dress in a closet for the rest of her life and died in 1914, still alone, still furious. The Blair County Historical Society acquired the gown decades later and placed it inside a sealed glass display. No hinges on the visitor's side, no vents, no contact with the air outside. The case was built specifically to preserve textile in a stable environment. No humidity changes, no temperature shifts, no possibility of air current reaching the fabric. And the dress moves. Museum staff have documented finding the gown in positions different from how it was arranged the previous evening. A sleeve lifted, the fabric gathered, as though someone had gathered it at the waist to dance. In full moonlight, and yes, they say specifically during full moons, visitors claim to see the hem sway inside the case, slowly, as if to music only the dress can hear. J.W. Acker, the author of Cursed Objects, visited Baker Mansion and noted that the reports spanned decades. Not a single viral moment, but a slow accumulation of testimony from people who had no reason to coordinate a story. I have sat in dark rooms watching objects for longer than is probably healthy, and I have learned one thing. The objects that unsettle people most are not the ones that scream. They are the ones that move when nobody is looking. There is a mirror in the same room, and it too has a reputation. But it is the dress that draws the crowds. Textile haunting is vanishingly rare in the literature. Cloth decays. Cloth is intimate, and cloth remembers the shape of the body it was meant to hold. The Blair County Historical Society confirms the dress, confirms the sealed case, confirms the story of Anna Baker. What they cannot confirm, and what no one has been able to record on camera in over a century of trying, is what happens to the dress between closing time and dawn. You are standing in a dim hotel corridor in Galveston, Texas. The carpet is thick. The air smells of salt and old wood. At the end of the hall, mounted in a gilded frame, hangs a portrait of a man in an 18th century military uniform. His name is Bernardo de Galvez, a Spanish colonial general, the man for whom the city is named. His eyes are on you. That is not a figure of speech. Hotel Galvez has stood on this stretch of the Gulf Coast since 1911. It was built on ground that still held the bones of victims from the Great Storm of 1900, the deadliest natural disaster in American history. That hurricane killed between 6,000 and 12,000 people in a single night. Whole neighborhoods were erased. The storm surge reached over 15 feet. bodies washed into the foundations of buildings that would be constructed years later. The hotel was erected as a symbol of recovery. The portrait was hung as a tribute. But the ground beneath the lobby had already soaked in more death than most cemeteries hold. Guests began complaining almost immediately, not about the general's face, about their cameras. Photographs taken in front of the portrait without first asking General Galvez for permission came back wrong. Faces blurred, light streaked, and in some shots taken with a flash, the area around the general's chest resolved into what multiple independent witnesses describe as a skull. Melissa Hall, a longtime guide for the hotel's official ghost tour, advises visitors to ask permission aloud before photographing the portrait. She also recommends shooting in groups of 3, claiming the anomaly appears less frequently in group shots. The hotel maintains a guest ledger specifically for paranormal reports. It runs to hundreds of entries. The rational explanation lands cleanly. Old oil paintings develop layered patinas of varnish and lacquer that refract flash photography in unpredictable ways. Angular lighting can produce pareidolia, the tendency of the human brain to see faces, especially skulls, in random visual noise. This accounts for the blurring, the streaking, and the skull. It does not account for why the effect vanishes when visitors ask permission first. That part has no optical explanation. Skeptics call it confirmation bias. You expect a good photo after asking, so you hold the camera steadier. Believers call it something else. The portrait of Bernardo de Galvez hangs 6 feet above ground, soaked in mass death. Whether the general's spirit guards the painting, or the painting simply sits in a building with too much grief in its foundations, the result for visitors is the same. You ask. Or you get a photograph you do not want to look at twice. Step away from the paintings for a moment. Leave the oils and the ghosts and the guilt. What comes next has no canvas, no frame, no human hand involved in its creation at all. In 2006, geologists drilling in the Jadar Valley of western Serbia pulled a core sample from deep underground and found a mineral that had never been classified. White, powdery, crystalline. Under ultraviolet light, it glowed an eerie pinkish orange that no one in the lab had seen before. They sent it to the Natural History Museum in London. The mineralogy department ran a full composition analysis and identified its formula: sodium lithium boron silicate hydroxide. That formula already existed, on a prop, in a movie. In Superman Returns, released the same year the mineral was discovered, a container of kryptonite carries a label with an identical chemical formula. Identical, not similar, not close. Sodium lithium boron silicate hydroxide, written by a screenwriter as pure fiction, and then found in the ground 12 months later as geological fact. The journal Nature covered the discovery in 2007. Museum staff began calling the mineral kryptonite informally before giving it the official name Jadarite, after the valley where it was found. It now sits in the Earth's Treasury Gallery at the Natural History Museum, displayed in the same room as the cursed amethyst of Indra. Because even institutions with a reputation for rationality appreciate a good joke. The screenwriters deny consulting geologists. The geologists deny any prior contact with the film. And the mineral, for its part, is not green, not radioactive, and does not weaken anyone from the planet Krypton. It simply glows in the dark and carries a formula that a human being invented out of thin air 1 year before the Earth produced the real thing. Coincidence is the word most people reach for. Scientists at the museum prefer a different term. They call it the curse of probability. Given enough chemical combinations, given enough fictional universes, eventually one will overlap with reality. The question is not whether it was bound to happen. The question is why it unsettles us so deeply when it does. The object is small enough to fit in your hand. A wooden bird with a human face, the body of a falcon, the head of a person, smooth skull, wide nose, and eyes. The eyes are the problem. The pupils are carved too wide, unnaturally dilated. the kind of gaze that does not look at you so much as through you, into whatever you are standing in front of. This is a Ba bird. It was carved sometime between 747 and 525 BCE during Egypt's late period, and it was placed in a tomb in Sheikh Abd el-Qurna, a necropolis on the west bank of the Nile, across the river from ancient Thebes. Its purpose was specific. In Egyptian belief, the Ba was the aspect of the soul that could leave the body after death and move between the world of the living and the world of the dead. The Ba bird was its vehicle. What makes this particular figure unusual is what came with it: a stone stela, a flat tablet, inscribed with a warning. Not a curse, exactly. Margaret Maitland, a curator of ancient Mediterranean collections at the National Museums of Scotland, where the object is held under inventory number A1891.107, has written extensively about the distinction. Egyptians did not think of these as supernatural threats. They thought of them as legal notices, addressed not to grave robbers, but to the gods themselves. The text warned that anyone who disturbed the burial would be denied passage to the afterlife and made miserable in this one. A legal filing, with the divine court as jurisdiction, and a penalty clause that extended beyond death into whatever came after. Consider the precision of this system. The Egyptians did not scatter vague threats across their tombs. They drafted enforceable language, named the offending party in advance, whoever enters this place, and specified consequences with the bureaucratic rigor of a tax code. The dead were not haunting the living, they were suing them, preemptively. Most golden masks and jeweled sarcophagi grab headlines, but Egyptologists who work with late-period burials will tell you that these small wooden idols were considered more dangerous than any golden ornament. Gold is wealth. A Ba bird is a soul. Steal the gold, and you are a thief. Disturb the Ba, and you are something worse. Someone who interfered with the mechanics of the afterlife. And the Egyptians believed the afterlife had enforcement mechanisms. The warning on the stela was not a bluff. It was a restraining order. The Ba bird sits in Edinburgh now, behind glass, staring at everyone who passes. Curators have noted, with professional understatement, that the figure has an unsettling effect on visitors. The expanded pupils create an optical illusion in which the eyes appear to track movement across the room. Whether that was the ancient sculptor's intention, whether a craftsman 25 centuries ago deliberately carved a pair of eyes designed to follow you, is a question nobody has answered. The child has no name, no date of birth, no record of who they were or how they died. What is known is this: at some point in the 19th century, a British collector acquired the mummified remains of an Egyptian child and brought them to Oxford. The body was never unwrapped. The linen bandages remain intact, holding the shape of a person who was very small and very young when the wrapping began. For decades, the mummy was displayed in the Pitt Rivers Museum as part of an exhibition titled Treatment of Dead Enemies. That title alone should give you pause. The museum eventually agreed. Think about that framing for a moment. The Ba bird we just looked at was created to protect the dead, to give their soul a vehicle, to enforce their legal rights across the boundary between life and what follows. And here, 3,000 years later, in one of the most respected museums in Britain, a child's body was placed under a sign that labeled it an enemy. Whatever warnings the Egyptians had inscribed, whatever restraining orders they had filed with their gods, this was precisely the violation they had tried to prevent. Before the removal, night security staff at the Pitt Rivers reported sounds from the gallery. Specifically, and multiple employees gave consistent accounts, the sound of a child crying. Low, intermittent, coming from the direction of the display case, after hours, when the building was empty. One guard described it to the Smithsonian Magazine as unmistakable, not a pipe settling, not wind through a vent, a voice. Visitors during the day reported something different but equally consistent, a physical sensation. Weight. People standing near the case described a heaviness in the chest that lifted the moment they stepped away. Not anxiety, not claustrophobia. Heaviness, as if something was pressing down from the inside. In September 2020, the museum removed the mummy from public display and transferred it to closed storage for what they described as cultural rest. Alongside it went a collection of shrunken heads, tsansa, acquired under similarly questionable circumstances. The museum replaced the case with a text about decolonization and the ethics of displaying human remains taken without consent. Now, let me be clear about the layered reality here. The museum's official statement attributes the removal entirely to ethical concerns, and those concerns are legitimate. A child's body, taken from Egypt without permission, displayed under a title that frames it as an enemy trophy. That is reason enough. But the timing is worth noting. The reports of crying and heaviness preceded the ethical review by years. Staff knew something was wrong in that gallery long before the committee met. Whether wrong means a draft through old pipes or something less explainable is a question the museum has chosen not to answer publicly. The child remains in storage. The museum is in discussions with Egyptian authorities about repatriation, and the gallery where the mummy once lay is, by every account, quiet now. What do we owe the dead? And what happens when we fail to pay it? Yaxley Hall is a 17th-century manor house in Suffolk, England. The kind of building where every floorboard has a voice and every corridor holds a cold spot that the heating cannot reach. On one of its walls hangs a portrait of a woman named Henrietta Nelson, painted around 1780 by the English artist William Johnson. Henrietta died in 1816 after falling down a staircase. Her will contained a specific instruction. She was to be buried in a mausoleum on the estate grounds. Subsequent owners of Yaxley Hall demolished the mausoleum, and that, according to local record, is when the portrait began to change. Visitors and owners have reported that Henrietta's face shifts over time. Not dramatically, not overnight, but across weeks and months, the expression seems to age, or, on occasion, to grow younger. The effect correlates, those who track it say, with how well the current occupants are treating the estate. A kind of spectral performance review, painted in oil. The portrait has been sold multiple times. It has been returned every time. Owners cite the same reason. Sounds at night, always near the painting. Footsteps. Breathing. The specific acoustic signature of someone standing very close behind you when you know you are alone. What makes Henrietta unusual in the catalog of haunted portraits is the consistency of the phenomenon across 2 centuries and multiple independent owners. Optical illusions from aging varnish or shifting light can explain a face that appears to change. They cannot explain why every single person who has taken this painting home has brought it back. People tolerate creaky houses. They tolerate drafts and strange noises and the occasional sleepless night. What they apparently cannot tolerate is the sustained feeling of being watched by someone who knows what you did to her mausoleum. The portrait remains at Yaxley Hall. The hall's historical records note the returns without editorial comment. And Henrietta, whoever she was in life, whatever she became after that fall, continues to watch from her frame. Patient, unblinking, keeping score. Sean Robinson never asked for the painting. His grandmother left it to him when she died, along with a warning. She had kept it in her attic in Cumbria for 25 years, locked away, face to the wall. Her instructions were simple. Do not hang it. Do not look at it for long. And whatever you do, do not sleep in the same room. Robinson hung it anyway. The painting has no title. Robinson calls it The Anguished Man. It shows a figure, barely a figure, more of a smear, twisted in what looks like agony. The brushwork is violent. The colors are dark. The face, if it is a face, is open-mouthed, screaming. His grandmother had told him the story behind it. The artist, unnamed, undated, unverified, had mixed his own blood into the paint. When the painting was finished, he took his own life. Whether that story is true is impossible to confirm. No independent analysis of the pigment composition has ever been published, But if the legend is even partially accurate, this is the second painting in our investigation created through an act of death. Minovia, born from a murder, the anguished man, born from a suicide. And in both cases, the canvas became the container for something the artist left behind. But Robinson documented what happened next. He set up cameras in the room where the painting hung and recorded continuously for days. The footage, uploaded to YouTube, has been viewed millions of times. In the recordings, a dark shape appears to move near the canvas. Sounds, low, rhythmic, somewhere between crying and moaning, register on the audio track. Temperature sensors placed by the Cumbria Paranormal Group in 2011 showed localized drops of several degrees near the painting, with no corresponding draft or ventilation source. Robinson's family reported physical experiences. His partner described being pushed on the staircase, not tripped, pushed, by something she could not see. Robinson himself described waking to find the painting had moved from the wall where he had hung it. Now, here is where I have to be careful. The entire evidentiary chain rests on one family's testimony and a set of YouTube videos that have never been independently verified under controlled conditions. The Cumbria Paranormal Group is an enthusiast organization, not an accredited laboratory. The blood in the paint claim has never been tested. This is, by any rigorous standard, the thinnest evidence in our entire investigation. A personal account supported by unverified recordings and a family legend with no paper trail. And yet, Robinson has refused every offer to sell the painting, offers that climbed into thousands of pounds. He says the painting is too dangerous for others to own. A man sitting on a viral marketing opportunity who refuses to cash in is either the most disciplined hoaxer in YouTube history or someone who genuinely believes the thing in his attic is alive. The painting remains in Cumbria, unwanted, unsold, unsleeping. The last object in this investigation is not cursed, it is not haunted, it does not glow under ultraviolet light, and no one has ever reported hearing it cry. It is a plug of earwax. 25 centimeters long, pulled from the ear canal of a dead blue whale. It sits in a jar of formaldehyde in the back rooms of the Natural History Museum in London, the same institution that houses the Jadeite. And it may be the most quietly extraordinary object in any museum on Earth. A blue whale's ear does not work the way yours does. Sound enters through the jaw. Wax accumulates in the ear canal in layers, one after another, year after year, for the whale's entire life, like the rings of a tree. Each layer is a chemical diary, hormones, pollutants, stress markers, all sealed in wax and preserved in sequence. In 2013, a team led by Stephen Trumbull at Baylor University in Texas published a study in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences that analyzed one of these plugs layer by layer. They mapped cortisol, the hormone the body produces under extreme stress, across every year of the whale's life, from the 1870s to its death in the early 2000s. I've spent a lot of late nights reading research papers for this channel. My eyes are built for it. But this one made me stop and sit with it for a while. Because what the data showed was not just surprising, it was accusatory. The cortisol spikes told a story that had nothing to do with the ocean. The first major spike aligned with 1914 to 1918, the second with 1939 to 1945. 2 world wars recorded not in ink or film, but in the biology of a creature that never set foot on land. The whale did not know what a war was. It did not read newspapers or hear speeches. But something about those years, the underwater detonations, the sonar, the sheer acoustic violence of industrialized killing, reached down into the deep ocean and wrote itself into this animal's body. And then the data got worse. In the 1960s, cortisol levels surged past anything the wars had produced. Not because of conflict, because of whaling. The peak era of industrial whale hunting registered in this plug as the single most stressful period in the animal's biological record, louder than both wars combined, more sustained, more total. National Geographic covered the study under the headline that Whale earwax reveals the stress of industrial whaling. But even that undersells it. This was not stress. This was a species listening to the systematic extermination of its own kind and recording the terror in its body, one waxy layer at a time. Personally, I think this object redefines what a curse actually is. We use the word for paintings that ruin photographs and dresses that sway in sealed cases. But if a curse is information stored in matter, suffering encoded in a physical object, waiting for someone to learn how to read it, then this plug of wax is the most cursed artifact in London. It recorded 130 years of human violence without anyone asking it to. And it held that record in silence, in the dark, in the belly of a creature that had no way to tell us what it knew. 10 objects. A pair of skeletons that rewrote their own love story when science caught up. A painting soaked in murder that still smells of flowers. A dress that dances for a wedding that never happened. A portrait that punishes photographers who forget their manners. A mineral that a screenwriter invented 1 year before the earth confirmed it. A wooden soul with eyes designed to follow you for eternity. A child's body that cried until someone finally listened. A face that ages or heals depending on how you treat its home. A canvas mixed, allegedly, with the blood of a dead man. And a cylinder of wax that absorbed every war, every hunt, every explosion the 20th century threw into the sea. Some of them are explained by optics, some by psychology, some by chemistry. None of them are explained entirely. And that gap, that space between what we can measure and what we feel standing in front of these objects, is the territory this channel was built to explore. Which of these 10 disturbs you most? Not frightens, disturbs. The one that stayed in your head after the facts ended. Name it. Explain why. The answer that convinces me the most gets pinned. Subscribe. The next investigation is already underway.